In today's training, we're going to cover a question that we get on a daily basis, which is how to lose fat and keep it off, and how our metabolism actually works. Now, before we dive in, I want to quickly introduce myself. My name is Simeon, and I have over a decade of experience helping busy women and professionals get in tremendous shape without all the restrictions and without starving themselves. So if you find yourself in a position where you want to improve your health, you want to lose the weight for good, make sure you watch this training until the very end. And with our team, we have a body transformation program called Impactful Look, which is a 16-week online fitness and nutrition coaching program that helps women get in their best shape without fad diets, starvation, or short-term fixes and gimmicks. There are 4 main problems that almost every woman faces, and usually without solving these problems, we can't get to the desired goals we have. Our program will help you solve these problems, and today we're going to discuss 2 of the components within reaching your goals. Now, first, we have no clear plan, and not having a clear plan can lead to messy and unpredictable actions. Second, we usually do the wrong food choices when it comes to reaching our goals. Third, we have not enough movement, and not moving enough can make you feel stressed, heavier, and moody. 4, we usually skip rest, and our bodies are machines. They need proper rest protocols to reach our goals. And today we're going to tackle a little bit of component number 2, 3, and 4, and then a little bit of 1 as well. And bonus problem yourself, if you can't focus, if you have poor work ethic and consistency, no planning abilities whatsoever, self-limiting beliefs, it's going to be almost impossible regardless of the plan you have to reach your goals. So that's why the mindset and the character traits and daily actions we take towards our goals are super, super important. So without further ado, let's dive into the training. There's a few disclaimers I want to mention before we start. Life is for a living, that's a very important part. And if you're constantly putting time and energy and effort into losing weight only to put it back on, then it's distracting you from all the incredible things you can put out into this world just from living life. Secondly, and just as importantly, studies have shown that cycling through diet after diet just to regain the weight has been shown to have some implications on your health and your metabolism long term. And I know some of you ladies have tried a diet or 2, and that's why I want to mention that going on a fat loss journey is a deeply personal thing. It's not for me as a coach or anyone else to tell you what you should do. You have the autonomy over your body. It should be your decision and only your decision to make. And if you decide to go for it, I hope it comes from a place of self-love and peace and care for yourself, and not standards or pressure from those around you. There's far too many people and companies pushing the agenda to make you feel bad and guilt trip you into taking action and changing your life. And people say a lot of things. They talk a lot. You're never going to make everyone happy. People are pointing fingers and saying you should do this, you should do that. The reality is that your body is yours and forget about everyone else. Your health, your happiness, your longevity, these are things that matter. And when it comes to happiness, fat loss isn't a promise of that. In fact, in some cases, fat loss can even undermine your long-term happiness. So I hope you stay in tune with yourself and never compare yourself to anyone. With that long-winded intro out of the way, let's dive into the topic that we get tons of questions about on a daily basis: how to lose weight and keep it off, and do so sustainably without starvation diets. So we're going to cover our approach to nutrition training and anything else that we might think that makes a difference to long-term fat loss whilst protecting your health. So we've already spoken about the science of why diets fail and why we so often see people lose weight and then just regain it again. But what drives cravings in our psychology and behaviors around certain foods? The most efficient and effective way to build muscle, creating a workout plan that works for you and makes a difference, and also the wrong way to go about fat loss. And by the way, we've got free guides on all of these topics that are much more in depth that I'm going to share with you at the very end of the video. But now let's just cover the basics, okay? And we're going to just touch upon a little bit of science because our bodies are complex. And anyone who tells you otherwise just hasn't studied them enough. Because the more you study them, the more you realize that the human nature and the human body is a super complex system. And for any personalized nutrition support, it's super important that you seek out a professional or someone who is fully qualified or who's been working with people for years. And for us, we partner with registered dietitians who have decades of clinical experience and who have additional specialties around the topics we want to cover. They supervise all of our coaching and nutrition programs and ensure that what we say holds true, match against what science says to say. But again, keep in mind, we're not medical professionals, and what I'm going to be sharing in this video is just for informational purposes. Now, first, let's tackle the nutrition, as that's the elephant in the room. And it usually starts with our metabolism. To understand what we should be eating, we should understand how our body works. And what metabolism is, in a basic terms, it's the energy and the total daily expenditure of our body. So it's made of four components. Our calories burned, or total daily expenditure, is composed of our basal metabolic rate, which is the energy required for our body to maintain basic life-sustaining function. So if you just laid in bed all day, you didn't even fidget, you didn't even eat, you'd burn your basal metabolic rate just from the processes like thermoregulation, respiration, and blood circulation. Then we've got physical activity, which is the energy that you burn as a direct result of intentional exercise. The third component is a non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or NEAT, and that's the energy needed for all other movements outside of exercise. So like brushing your teeth, cleaning the house, making dinner, dancing around the house, every activity that takes movement. And it's all compiled into NEAT. It's pretty neat. The last component is thermic effect of food. So the energy needed to digest, absorb, and metabolize food and all the other components together make up your energy out. So now we understand the basics of metabolism. We're going to try to understand how calorie deficits actually work and why calorie deficits fail us. I'm sure many of you have tried calorie deficits in the past. You restricted your calories rigorously. You've gotten some results in the short term, but then in the long term you plateaued and then maybe you gained the weight on top. So how calorie deficits work is very misunderstood. We hear it all the time. Calories in minus calories out, done, calorie deficit, that's it. And that is true, but it's only part of the story because there's a huge implicit assumption that your total daily energy expenditure is fixed and it doesn't change. And that is not true because the traditional thinking tells us that if we eat in a 200 calorie deficit, we're technically burning those 200 calories and we're losing it as pounds of weight on the scale. If we decrease our calories by 1,000, the assumption stays that we're going to be in 1,000 calories deficit. The problem with that is our body is way smarter than that. Your energy out is adaptive. Your body is a machine honed over hundreds of thousands of years to keep you alive. So when you see a sudden drop in food availability, your body is not just going to sit there and start twiddling its thumbs. Our bodies are experts at restoring energy balance. So when there is a significant less food available, they achieve that by reducing our energy expenditure. One of the ways that our body uses to do that is to restrict the energy available for processes that aren't specifically required for immediate survival. So let's see how it works in reality. Your total daily energy expenditure is linked to the energy we consume and adapts and adjusts quickly matching it. Research shows that process like menstruation, which isn't required for immediate survival right now, gets less energy. Process like digestion as well. So you might notice increased occurrences of constipation, indigestion, bloating, impaired immune function, and less energy for growth and cell repair. So if you've been on a restrictive calorie reduction diet, these are some of the things you might have experienced without ever realizing what's the cause of it. And all of these together drive that metabolic rate down. By not executing on these functions every single day, your body burns less energy. And so that deficit you thought you were in isn't really there, but you're still eating less food. But that's not the full picture because muscle loss also plays a role into how your body and metabolism adapts. Muscle isn't like fat when it comes to our metabolism because muscles burn way more calories than fat does. So let's go back to our example. If we reduce the calories burned for a long period of time, our total daily expenditure also decreases. That in turn decreases our basal metabolic rate, slows down our process adaptation, speeds up the muscle loss. When it comes to physical activity, we experience strength loss, we have low drive and poor recovery. When it comes to non-exercise activity thermogenesis, we have reduced body weight and low drive. So if we go back to our basal metabolic rate, muscle is metabolically active tissue. It requires energy just to have. And so even at rest, your BMR will go down if you have less muscle. But on top of that, the more and more muscle you lose, the more likely it is that your physical activity will also go down because it's that muscle that really enables you to have high energy expenditure workouts. To be honest, even before muscle loss, which takes a few weeks and months to happen, even just feeling low energy and tired from having a large calorie deficit will impact your physical activity. Because even though you feel like you're pushing yourself and it's exhausting, you just won't have the energy. And finally, when your weight falls, your non-exercise activity thermogenesis will also fall. So everything you do, that walk in the park, your grocery shopping, it will all take less energy because you weigh less. And it means it's really important to retain that useful weight, which brings us to point number 2, that useful weight is your muscle, your metabolically active tissue. And on top of that, even separate to your weight going down, there are so many layers and building blocks on top of that. Thermogenesis is mostly subconscious. Whether or not you decide to walk up the stairs, whether you get up from your sofa and grab your phone charger or just leave it there, because who cares? If you have less energy to give, you ain't gonna give it out for free. Muscle is our engine for future fat loss. By supporting BMR, our PA, our need, it props up our energy expenditure. So what does all of this mean in simple terms? This means that blindly making energy cuts isn't the way to go, because your body has compensatory mechanisms that kick in to offset those energy reductions. The last thing you want to do is chase your TDE down further and further until you're eating 500 to 700 or even 1,000 calories less than where you started. Body composition is kind of the same because you've lost fat and muscle instead. We want to lose fat by keeping that TDE as close as possible to where we started, and it means minimizing those compensatory mechanisms and maximizing the preservation of muscle. And research is showing us that the best way to achieve both of these things is with small deficits. So what's a small deficit? Well, researchers have found that deficits as small as 100 calories a day have been shown to minimize the weight regain. And in general, the maximum deficit shouldn't be more than 10% of your maintenance caloric intake. So let's take a look at an example of a person trying to lose fat today. We'll take a rough maintenance caloric intake of around 2,700 to 3,000 calories. And if that sounds high, bear with us, because we just use it as a reference point, and feel free to adapt the principle to your caloric intake. If the goal was to lose fat, then we would drop the calories by 250 to 300 calories max a day, because that's 10% of our caloric intake. We personally don't always track the calories when we first start out, because there's other components and habit building parts to fixing our nutrition. But if you want to track, that's absolutely fine. We found that adopting calorie counting as first healthy eating encounter might be a little bit overwhelming for people that are just starting out, so we pace ourselves into that within our programs. And instead, what we do is guide our clients gently to that caloric reduction to keep that preservation of muscle. We try and get in about 1.4 grams to 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight. We also like to make a couple of adjustments to the training protocols to increase that energy expenditure and nudge us towards that 10% caloric deficit. So not all of our caloric deficit has to come from nutrition. It can also come from training, which makes it super easy and a lot more enjoyable. Now, when I mentioned that within our approach, we value sustainability over speed. There's for sure ways to lose weight faster, but I think the biggest lever you can pull when it comes to changing your health for good and adopting habits that you can use for life is changing your perspective of time. I'm saying it because if you want to enjoy your journey and feel a lot better, that's the way to go. I also care about your results, and I promise you that if you take the long path to slowly and gradually stack habits on top, you're going to reach to your goal much faster and stay there, rather than sprinting there and then having to start all over because you reach that tipping point and then you yo-yo the weight back on. We recently had a client, and fat loss was one of her biggest goals. She wanted to lose 30 kilos, which requires a certain amount of time. And when she started, she had that fixated idea in her mind that she wants to do it within 4 months, and she's willing to do all it takes. But our reply to that was that she should not care how long it takes, because you only have to do it one time. You're done. Then you can do other things and enjoy your life and just sustain your results, which is so much easier if you do it gradually, without restricting yourself and without going into yo-yo cycles. So again, slow and steady wins the race. Abundance. When we move into a fat loss phase, we really prioritize abundance. We love to have abundance of food because on a subconscious level, our body is getting everything it needs, and yet we're losing fat. If we're losing fat doesn't mean our mentality has to be about restricting. It's about keeping in abundance the foods that help you get there. The first thing we do is we make sure that our fridge is full with micronutrient-rich foods. We are talking fruits, veggies, complex carbohydrates. We make sure that those are readily available. We really try and let ourselves get full and satisfied on these foods. And since these foods are less calorie dense, that makes the meals so much more substantial. And it gives us enough time so that we feel that feeling of fullness. And that's nice because it means that when we crave chocolate, chips, or maybe pizza, we get to enjoy them for what they are and not rely on them for getting full. Now, when it comes to cravings, it's important to know that it's not the calories that drive whether or not you're feeling full during a meal. There are so many other cues like the length of your meal, the volume of your meal, the water content of your meal, your expectations of fullness. So it's easier to eat extra calories when you're eating energy-dense foods to get full because those extra calories aren't making you get full faster. In general, though, we don't put any foods off limits because the power of reactance, which is super strong. It's like the power of the force. Reactance is basically just an unpleasant motivational arousal that emerges when people experience a threat or loss of their free behaviors. It serves as a motivator to restore one's freedom. In tests, subjects who were cut off from particular foods feel significantly more cravings toward that food and actually end up consuming more than those who weren't restricted from that food in the first place. Obviously, we're all different and these studies find general relationships. It's just worth thinking about it if that's how it feels for you. As since we're on the topic of psychology, studies have found that we're elite at hunting food when we're deprived of it. During large caloric deficits, all our brain wants to think about is food. Our attention is biased towards foods. Our senses are heightened. And they do these studies on dieters by using neuroimaging, eye tracking, and nasal performance tests. And to simplify, let's just say we get looking, we get sniffing, and we get finding. This all suggests that smaller deficits with inclusive mindset around foods aren't just easier, they're disproportionately easier than large caloric deficits with a restrictive mindset. That's how it feels. It doesn't matter that it takes a little longer because it's that much easier. We're simply chilling and reaching our goals. Now let's talk a little bit about training. We've already know two key things. The first is that muscle preservation is crucial. The more muscle we protect, the more we protect our metabolism, and the easier it is to sustain these long-term fat loss results. The second is that we can create a support to our target of roughly 10% caloric deficits by increasing our energy expenditure through physical activity. And that way, all the changes we make towards food are small and simple. Research has shown that concurrent training, so mixing resistant training with cardio, is a great way to lose fat while preserving fat-free mass. So as far as training goes, let's look at training volume first and what we don't suggest doing. Don't try to over-increase your total training volume to more than 4 to 4.5 hours per week, especially if you're a novice in the gym and you've never exercised before. Anything above that, we feel like most people struggle to recover and over the long term wouldn't turn out favorably because, you've got a life to live, you've got other things to do. And if you're not eating properly, you're going to be prone to injuries and recovery is going to be so much harder because we've already decreased our food intake. So we try to keep it within what already fits your lifestyle the most and no more than 4 to 4.5 hours. So how can we maximize these 4.5 hours? We should try and keep the majority of our sessions for resistance training. And in those sessions, about 50% of our moves are going to be hypertrophy moves, mostly because we want to be preserving muscle. If none of them makes sense, make sure you check out our free guide on how to create the perfect workout plan that I'm going to share with you at the rest of the video, or you can check the link in the description. We're going to be pushing ourselves for around 12 to 20 reps with about 1 or 2 minute rest in between each set. This isn't so much about progressive overload, it's more about preserving your strength and keeping an eye on what you're lifting to make sure you're not going down. To support with maximizing your total body fat-free mass and for upping your energy expenditure, we suggest basically only focusing on compound moves and trying to use free weights as much as possible. Moves like squats, barbell rolls, lunges, lat pull downs, bench press, hip thrusts. Again, check the workout guide for details. We should try and minimize the amount of isolation work that we do on small muscle groups because a small amount of mechanical tension and a small amount of energy expenditure isn't really going to help us in our fat loss journey. We also tend to cut back on any strength work while we're dropping fat. So anything which is on the 1 to 5 rep range we'll keep for times of caloric abundance because we've noticed it lowers the total volume load, and it's because strength work is disproportionately more fatiguing. So for example, if load goes up by 10 to 20%, the reps will go down by 50 to 70% and will need to take much longer rest times. So overall, your sets and reps will fall disproportionately fast for how much weight you've added. Now for the extra burn and the other 50% of those sessions, we'll be focusing on dynamic movements. We will use lighter resistance, but we're moving quickly, and this helps exert a lot of energy. So here we rely more on fast switch muscle fibers, moving at speed to exert maximum or very close to maximum output in every single rep. Some of our favorite exercises that allow these are burpees, bow slams, kettlebell swings, ballistic rolls, and dumbbell cleans. When we're doing hypertrophy, rest time is about 1 to 2 minutes of rest. And then for the dynamic and explosive moves, we could give ourselves about 1.5 minutes to 2 rest. Do these workouts 3 times per week, and then we could have one session dedicated to cardio. And it can be whatever you like. It could be HIIT, it could be going for a walk or just grabbing coffee for an hour. Just try to read your body, okay? If you have enough energy but not so much time because you're going out for the weekend, then you can do a 20-minute HIIT session and really go out. And a quick disclaimer here, and something I want to introduce, is the VO2 max and what really HIIT means. Because more and more we see HIIT workouts that are being posted online and in so many places, and often people refer to HIIT to any body weight circuit, and it could be interval training, but the reality is that high-intensity interval training is intense, and scientists are testing their subjects to 80% of their heart rate max, or 90% of their VO2 max. So when you see HIIT moves that are just like plank or bodyweight squats or an ab move, they're great moves, but it's important to not confuse them with what HIIT really is. So generally, researchers agree that you have to be hitting at least 85% of your heart rate max for it to be considered high-intensity interval training. So you really have to be exploding quick some moves and moving really fast. And it's going to feel intense, but that's where you get the time saving from, okay? And if we find a way around that, we'll let you know. You're going to be the first one to know if there's an easier way. We are all about shortcuts and finding easier way to reach our goals. But for sure, slacking on the workouts isn't one of them. Now, when it comes to progress, it's super important that you keep track of that. But there are 2 very important things. Using weight as metric of your success is basically setting yourself up for failure. Weight comprises of both fat and fat-free mass. And losing one of them goes towards achieving that goal we're picturing in our head, and losing the other is a serious problem. Plus, our weight is really easily manipulated by things we don't even think about, like water retention, which can be caused by increased glycogen or inflammation. So to give you an example, if we've been on a fat loss journey for a month and there's 2 versions of ourselves in 2 different parallel universes, and one has lost 4 kilograms, half from muscle and then half from fat, and the other has lost 1 kilograms all from fat, you better opt in for version number 2, because fat-free mass always beats kilograms on the scale any day of the week. And it dramatically improves the way we look. And that is the body recomposition that we're often after, and that impactful feminine look that many of you ladies want. Now, the second important component, now that we've clarified that the scale is not a good indication of, is to be taking progress pictures. They're our best friends. Every time we're starting a new journey, it's important to get those photos all around. Just set your phone on a timer shooting in the corner and start your posing practice. We do a front, we do a side, we do another side, we do the back, we do tense, we do untense, we go wild. And it doesn't matter if you're really bad at posing. It's just a reference point, and you can just play around with it. We always do our progress pic first thing in the morning, right after we went to the bathroom, before we had any breakfast or water or anything like that. And then we give it at least another week before we're taking a fresh set of progress pics, preferably following a rest day. We do that because we're recovering and we've got less inflammation from the workout as well. And because there are so many variables, we make sure that we're not comparing 2 photos unless they're at least 1 month apart. The other thing we could keep an eye on is how our clothes fit. In 1 month, maybe 2 months, do our clothes feel different? Do they fit differently? Often neglected component is sleep, and it's the last but probably one of the most important things on our list. Sleep is amazing, sleep science is amazing, and being a good sleeper is such a big flex in our modern day society. And if you can average around 7.5 to 8 hours of sleep, that's solid. And by the way, sleep plays a massive role in regulating our hormones, and it's our hormones that control our hunger cues and fullness levels. We have research now that shows that just 3 nights of sleep deprivation significantly increases the ghrelin levels, which then significantly increase the amount of calories we eat per day. And on top of the general hunger and fullness levels, research has also shown that sleep deprivation increases our cravings for high energy dense foods. And neuroimaging studies have shown us that when we're sleep deprived, the part of our brain which is associated with hedonic function, aka pleasure, lights up in response to high energy dense foods. The intriguing part is that they're not even restricting the subject's sleep that much, just a couple of hours. And some of the subjects are still getting 6 to 6.5 hours, and they're still noticing those changes. So that's sleep, which is the last thing we want to cover about that has a massive impact on your journey. Again, we have a lot more free guides and trainings at the bottom of this page in the description. And we cover all aspects when it comes to living healthier and a happier life. And if you want a one-on-one help to help you reach your goals and have somebody guide you and coach you through the transformation and all the nuances that I've just shared with you, you can join our Impactful Look program. There's going to be a link below to apply, and we're going to cover everything you need from A to Z without restrictive diets, countless hours of exercising, or any guesswork. So if you don't have the time for another fat and you want sustainable results, make sure you book a call from the link below, and we'll see if we're going to be able to help. And then again, here's the links to all our free trainings below. Make sure you grab them, and I'll see you in the next video.